tres, cuatro. Hi, Stan Granis. You find me on Instagram at Stan and Roy, where you'll find out that I was born in 1954, came of age and went through puberty as part of the peace movement of the 60s. I currently live with a roommate and partner named Roy Boy, who was hatched approximately mid-April of 2016, and he's never met another chicken, and he doesn't understand you, and I don't either. And that's what it says on the bio for my Instagram page, so that's what you get. Like most people who came of age in the movement, I spent some time in the military. When I got out of the military, I found out that all of the same people that wouldn't hire me because they were afraid I would get drafted had changed their minds and decided that they wouldn't hire me because I was a baby killer. So I ended up going to college as the best job I could get for 11 and a half years. Took almost every class in the arts and sciences catalog. This was at New Mexico State University. At all the time I was growing up on the street, from the time I ran away from home when I was a kid, the safest place to hang out was always libraries and community colleges, and at that time what we called free schools and free universities. And through them I spent quite a bit of time effectively studying at Chico State out of the California university system, or state college system. And the whole time I was in the Army, my training was all accredited through Baylor, which was fairly extensive. So you could say that I've spent half of my life in college in one way or another. In Las Cruces, where my family lived, where I spent my childhood, a lot of it. I spent the last several years that I was there, that's where I was for 11 years straight, almost 12. I spent the last 5 years that I was there splitting my time between three things that had little or nothing to do with maintaining a high GPA or even passing some of my classes. I worked for an AI project that was directed out of George Mason University, and I also worked for the Republican Party as first low-level campaign worker and finally as a campaign designer. Worked on a few kind of high-profile campaigns.
Was the Republican Party congruent with your beliefs at the time politically?
My beliefs politically are pretty cynical then and now. I made the decision to work with the Republican Party by looking at historical swings, and it looked to me like the Republican Party were the ones that were going to win the next couple of times. And so I joined them because I thought it would be more like finding something out. I'm still basically a child of the movement. I don't trust any politician of any demographic. During the days of the movement, it is true that the Republicans were closer to being on the right path than the Democrats are. Now the Democrats are way over the edge and the Republicans are right there behind them. If one of them is crazier than the other, it's not by much. Well, the reason I got out of politics at all was the discovery that for all my misgivings and guilt feelings about infiltrating something, that I hadn't infiltrated anything. I had joined what might as well be called an infiltrators club. And that there wasn't a single person that I met, Libertarian, Democrat, or Republican, above the high school level, that actually believed any of the things that they were saying. Their primary focus was on gaining power for themselves at one level or another. Their political platform was based on their best guess as to what the largest number of people they could persuade to vote for them wanted to hear them say. Not much else going on in most cases, and that's about when I decided to bail out. But I was doing it as a learning experience, And what I basically learned is there's nothing to see here, so I moved along, to borrow a phrase from our first responders. They're not who's running anything. The other thing I did while I was attending New Mexico State University for the last few years was teach both as an instructor's assistant. That's about 4-5 levels down from being a professor and is not a paid position. I taught introductory philosophy classes to kids fresh out of high school. At the other end, also unpaid. Because I was much older than other students and had such a wide variety of education and experience already, I took part in the teaching of seminars, which occur at the 300 level, but that's only a way of filtering who gets in, not of describing the technical level of the classes. Basically stuff that I knew something about from other sources. And that's when I became the best at political systems and other forms of system analysis, which, although now it contributes most to my understanding of philosophical systems, at the time what we were working on was an artificial intelligence system based on a Boolean algebra framework, which is now the one that Google uses to run the search engine that you use every day. When you say you're going to Google something, you're talking about a search engine that began as an artificial intelligence process at George Mason University, and in which I took a very, very tiny part, but a part that got me in the door so I could actually see some shit. So when I say I know what I've seen, I do. But whether I ever understood any of it was questionable then and is now. We had a hard disk drive that had a capacity over a megabyte. That was about an 18-inch platinum disc that spun so fast that it lifted itself up off of its own bearings and flew in the air like a flying saucer.
Wow.
And you couldn't light a cigarette anywhere in the building because the tolerances were so tight that a molecule of cigarette smoke could have made it wobble out and crash. A computer that would fit in a pocket-sized flip phone now took the whole trunk of a car to move at that time. But that's actually surprisingly all it takes to get artificial intelligence that actually is intelligent, that actually does think at some rudimentary level. I've lived on the street mostly since I was a kid. Stop by the locker room and take a shower and put on the clean clothes in your locker. Go in and teach a class and come back out. For the last part of it...
I think Roy wants some attention.
Yeah. For the last part of it, the Republican Party was renting me an efficiency apartment to use as an office. And during the time that it wasn't open for business, I was free to sleep in it. And so I wasn't living on the street then. For a while I had a roommate that, because I could pay my share of the rent some of the time, was willing to carry me other parts of the time. But for the most part I lived on the GI Bill of Rights and lived outside just like I always have. Basically I got tired of being involved in politics, and by that time everything I was doing, I was working for the student newspaper as the VA editor and was vice president of the college Republicans and working for the Republican Party for spending money and working on a basically Republican-controlled, definitely progressive-controlled AI project in my spare time. And when I got tired of it and dropped out of politics, it left me with nothing to do a lot of the time. So in order to have something to do, I guess this is another side story I didn't mention. I took a job as assistant editor to Publisher Parish Limited Circulation magazine called the Quarterly Journal of the Southwest Regional Philosophical Society. One of the things that I edited was a plan written by a team member in Canada for essentially weaponizing the project as a way of manipulating the public and controlling rather than reading public opinion. He called it the Pilotos Project. pilotos being the same thing basically as a helmsman, the guy at the other end of the boat from the steersman. That's also the name of the highest ranking guy in the subterranean Templar Masonic type stuff, and that kind of spooked me. And so I checked it out a little bit and showed it to my partner, and it kind of spooked her a little bit. We ended up dropping out of that project as well. I ended up with not much to do. I'd already taken every class that I could bring myself to take out of the Arts and Sciences catalog. Being a professional student was wearing thin. So I hitchhiked up to Santa Fe, New Mexico and moved under a bridge.